I'm 35, my wife, Jessica, is the same age. We've been married for 8 years, together for 12. On the outside, we had it all. A beautiful home, 2 stable jobs, and what I thought was a rock-solid relationship. The kind of life that made other people say, "You guys are perfect together." Honestly, I thought so too. Jessica was my best friend before she was my wife. We met in college, fell in love hard and fast, and started building our life together piece by piece. She was always the life of the party, effortlessly charming and fun to be around, while I was the quieter one who liked to stay in the background. Somehow it just worked. But looking back, maybe I missed the cracks or ignored them. There were little things that didn't sit right. The way Jessica loved attention, her need to be at the center of every social gathering, and the fact that she'd sometimes push boundaries just to see how far she could go. I always chalked it up to her personality. She was bold, confident, and unapologetically herself. Last year, I stumbled across something that shattered the image of our perfect life. We had this old external hard drive we used to back up photos and videos. It had been collecting dust in a drawer for years, but I decided to clean it out and see if there were any memories worth keeping. I found plenty of happy moments. Our honeymoon in Hawaii, holidays with family, goofy videos we'd recorded when we were young and carefree. Then, as I was scrolling through the folders, one caught my eye. It was titled Bachelorette. I clicked on it, expecting to see pictures of her and her friends celebrating before the wedding. What I saw instead left me frozen. The first video was grainy, like it had been shot on someone's old phone. Jessica was front and center, laughing and dancing. She looked so happy, carefree, even. But as the video went on, things shifted. The camera panned to a male dancer, shirtless, grinding in front of her. I told myself it was just harmless fun. Then came the second video. In this one, Jessica was sitting on a chair in the middle of the room while the dancer performed for her. Her friends were cheering, egging her on, and she didn't look embarrassed or uncomfortable. She looked excited. And then, clear as day, the video showed her pulling him closer, her hands roaming, her mouth meeting his. I closed the folder and sat there, my heart pounding, my stomach twisted into knots. I wanted to believe it was just a wild moment, a drunk mistake. But then I found the third video, and that's when I knew. She didn't just kiss him. She crossed every boundary we had ever set for our relationship. I couldn't even watch the whole thing. I sat in the dark for what felt like hours, the hard drive still plugged into my laptop. My mind was racing. How could this have happened? How could she do this to me? The thing is, I never had any reason to doubt Jessica. Not until now. She had always been attentive, loving, and supportive. I trusted her completely. But those videos, they were like a sledgehammer to the foundation of our marriage. I spent the rest of the night replaying every moment of our relationship in my head, looking for signs I might have missed. I thought about how confident she had been at our wedding, how she looked me in the eye and promised to love me forever. Now I couldn't help but wonder, was it all a lie? I didn't sleep that night. My mind was a storm of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. By morning, I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to confront Jessica. When she came downstairs, cheerful and humming to herself, I felt a pang of resentment. How could she act so normal while I was unraveling inside? "Jess," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "we need to talk." She froze, her cheerful demeanor faltering. "What's wrong?" I held up the hard drive. "I was going through this last night. Found some old videos from your bachelorette party." Her face turned pale. That was my first sign. She knew exactly what I was talking about. "Oh," she said, her voice suddenly small. What did you see?" Couldn't hold back anymore. "I saw you making out with some stripper. I saw you do more than that." "What the hell, Jessica?" Her eyes widened, and for a second, I thought she might deny it. But then, to my surprise, she burst into tears. "I'm so sorry," she sobbed, covering her face with her hands. "I didn't think you'd ever find out. It was a stupid mistake, a drunken mistake. I wasn't thinking." I stared at her, my anger boiling over. A mistake? Jessica, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Multiple choices. You knew exactly what you were doing. She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. Please let me explain, she pleaded. It was just one night. One stupid night. I was drunk. My friends were pushing me. I didn't know how to say no. Her excuses felt like gasoline on a fire. You didn't know how to say no? You didn't look like you were struggling, Jessica. You looked like you were having the time of your life. She flinched at my words but didn't argue. Instead, she fell to her knees, clutching at my arm. Please, you have to believe me. I love you. I've never done anything like that since. I swear. Her tears didn't move me. I felt like a stranger in my own home, staring at someone I thought I knew but clearly didn't. Do you even understand what you've done? I said, my voice breaking. You cheated on me days before our wedding, and you didn't even have the decency to tell me. You let me marry you without knowing the truth. She cried harder, repeating the same apologies over and over, but I wasn't interested in hearing them. The betrayal was too fresh, too raw. You should have told me, I said, standing up and walking toward the door. You should have given me the choice to walk away before we got married. But instead, you lied to me for 8 years. Her sobs followed me as I left the house. I needed air. I needed space. Most of all, I needed to figure out how to process the fact that my entire marriage was built on a lie. I spent the rest of the day driving aimlessly, my thoughts spinning in circles. I wanted to believe her when she said it was a one-time thing, but how could I? She'd hidden it from me for nearly a decade. What else could she be hiding? When I finally went back home that evening, Jessica was waiting for me, her eyes red and puffy. She looked like she'd been crying all day. I want to make this right, she said softly as I walked in. Whatever it takes, I'll do it. I'll go to therapy, I'll quit drinking, I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. Her desperation should have made me feel something, sympathy, maybe even pity, but all I felt was numb. I don't know if there's anything left to fix, I said, my voice flat. Her face crumpled, but I didn't have the energy to comfort her. I went upstairs, locked the door, and spent the night on the couch in my office. The next few days were a blur of tension and avoidance. Jessica kept trying to talk to me, but I wasn't ready to hear her out. I was too consumed by my own thoughts, replaying the videos in my mind, questioning every moment of our relationship. It wasn't just the betrayal itself that hurt. It was the fact that she'd been able to lie to me for so long. Every "I love you," every promise of forever, felt tainted now. And yet, a part of me didn't want to let go. We had built a life together, shared dreams and plans for the future. I didn't want to throw all of that away. But how could I ever trust her again? As I sat in my office one night, staring at the hard drive, I realized that this was just the beginning. I thought I had seen the worst of it, but deep down, I knew there was more to uncover. And I was right. I couldn't shake the feeling that Jessica's confession only scratched the surface. Something about her desperate apologies and sudden willingness to do anything felt calculated. It wasn't just guilt, it felt like fear. Fear that I'd find out more. That thought planted itself in my mind and refused to let go. By the fourth night, as Jessica slept in the guest room for the first time in years, I found myself staring at the hard drive again. What else was on it? What else had been hidden in plain sight all these years? I opened the folder again, this time digging deeper. Most of the files were innocent, photos and videos from trips, holidays, and everyday moments. But then I found another folder, buried within several layers of directories. It wasn't labeled, just a random string of numbers and letters. I clicked it open and my blood ran cold. The folder was filled with videos, photos, and messages, screenshots of conversations between Jessica and her friends about the bachelorette party. The tone of the messages was light, even gleeful. One message from her maid of honor, Kelly, read, "Girl, you were wild last night. That dancer didn't know what hit him, lol." Jessica's reply made my stomach churn. OMG. Don't remind me. I can't believe I did that. At least it's not like Aaron will ever find out. I kept scrolling. The messages only got worse. They joked about how drunk she was, how handsy she'd gotten with the dancer, and how it was her last chance to have some fun before getting married. Then I found the videos. Not just the ones I'd already seen, but new ones, ones that showed more. In one clip, Jessica was sitting on the dancer's lap, laughing as her friends cheered her on. The next video cut to her leading him into what looked like a private room. The camera didn't follow, but the implication was clear. I felt sick. It wasn't just a drunken mistake. It wasn't just one stupid night. It was deliberate, calculated, and worst of all, she'd laughed about it with her friends, as if it was no big deal. I thought about all the times Kelly and the rest of Jessica's friends had come over to our house, smiling and laughing with me like everything was fine, like I wasn't the punchline to some inside joke. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed the laptop shut and left the house. Jessica was awake when I came back. She must have heard the door slam on my way out because she was sitting on the couch, waiting for me. "Where were you?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. I just threw the laptop onto the coffee table and opened the folder, playing one of the videos in front of her. Her face went white. "Aaron, please. Don't. Just don't." I snapped, my voice shaking. "You told me it was a mistake, Jessica. You told me it didn't mean anything. But this wasn't a mistake. This wasn't just one moment of weakness. You planned this. You enjoyed it." Tears streamed down her face as she tried to explain. "I didn't plan anything. It just happened. I was drunk. My friends were pushing me. Stop blaming everyone else," I yelled. "You made those choices, Jessica. You did this. And then you covered it up for 8 years. 8 years of lying to my face. How could you do that?" She stood up, her tears quickly replaced by anger. "I didn't tell you because I knew how you'd react. You've always been so uptight, so judgmental. I didn't want to ruin what we had over something that didn't mean anything." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. Didn't mean anything? It meant enough for you to laugh about it with your friends. It meant enough for you to betray me before our wedding. She crossed her arms, her tone shifting to defensiveness. "So what? It was one night. One mistake. I've been a good wife to you for 8 years. Doesn't that count for anything?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "A good wife," I repeated, incredulous. "A good wife doesn't lie to her husband for nearly a decade. A good wife doesn't treat her marriage like a backup plan after her fun is over." Jessica glared at me, her tears gone now. "You know what? Maybe I'm not the only one at fault here. You've never exactly been exciting, Aaron. You're so predictable, so boring. Maybe if you'd been a little more spontaneous, I wouldn't have felt the need to let loose that night." Her words cut deeper than I thought possible. After everything she'd done, she was trying to blame me? I stared at her, my anger giving way to something colder. "You know what, Jessica? I think we're done here." Her eyes widened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm done with this marriage. I'm done with your lies, your excuses, your gaslighting. I'm done pretending we can fix this." She opened her mouth to argue, but I held up a hand to stop her. "You made your choices, Jessica. Now I'm making mine." And with that, I walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, speechless. That night, I started looking up divorce lawyers. But as I was researching, I stumbled across something else. Something that made everything I just uncovered seem like the tip of the iceberg. I wasn't prepared for what I found next. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to uncover. Jessica's reaction during the confrontation hadn't just been defensive. It had been panicked, almost like she was afraid of what else I might dig up. And if she was that afraid, there had to be something bigger lurking beneath the surface. That night, after my first round of divorce lawyer research, I opened the hard drive again. I couldn't stop myself. It was like picking at a wound even though it hurt. This time I combed through everything, every photo, every video, every message. At first I thought I wouldn't find anything new. But then I stumbled across another hidden folder. It was buried even deeper than the last one, almost as if someone had tried to make it disappear. The folder was labeled Vegas. Vegas. We hadn't been to Vegas together in years. But as I clicked it open, my heart sank. The timestamps on the files were from the same week as her bachelorette party. The first video was another shaky recording. It showed Jessica and her friends at a club, laughing and drinking. They were surrounded by a group of men. Definitely not strippers this time. These were regular guys, and they were all over them. One man in particular stood out. He was tall, muscular, and had his arm around Jessica the entire time. At first, I thought it was just innocent flirting. But then the video cut to another scene, Jessica and the same guy walking out of the club together, hand in hand. My stomach turned. The next video showed them in what looked like a hotel room. Jessica was laughing, sitting on the bed, while the guy poured them both drinks. The camera cut off before anything explicit happened, but I didn't need to see the rest to know where it was heading. I scrolled through the rest of the folder, my hands shaking. There were more photos, more videos, more evidence of what she'd done that weekend. It wasn't just the stripper. It wasn't just one mistake. She cheated on me multiple times during her bachelorette trip. And the worst part? Her friends knew. They were in on it. They'd covered for her, laughed about it, and acted like everything was fine when they stood by her side at our wedding. I felt like a fool. The next morning, I confronted Jessica again. I waited until she came downstairs, still groggy from the sleepless nights we'd both been having. She barely glanced at me as she poured herself a cup of coffee. "We need to talk," I said, my voice cold. She sighed, already defensive. "What now?" I placed the laptop on the table and opened the Vegas folder. Her face went pale as the videos started playing. "Care to explain this?" I asked, my tone icy. Her hands trembled as she reached for the laptop, but I pulled it away. "No more lies, Jessica. No more excuses. I want the truth." She sat down, her face buried in her hands. For a moment, I thought she might finally come clean. But when she spoke, it was the same litany of excuses. "I was drunk," she mumbled. "I didn't mean for it to happen." I slammed my hand on the table, making her jump. "Stop lying to me. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was an entire weekend of betrayal. You planned this. You knew exactly what you were doing." Tears streamed down her face, but this time, they didn't move me. "Fine," she snapped, her tone shifting to anger. "You want the truth? Yes, I cheated. Yes, it happened more than once. But it was years ago, Erin. I've been loyal to you ever since. Does that not count for anything?" Her audacity stunned me. "Loyal? You've been lying to me for 8 years, Jessica. Every moment of our marriage has been a lie. How can you even use the word loyal after what you've done?" She stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "You know what? Maybe I lied because I knew you couldn't handle the truth. You're so self-righteous, so perfect. You don't know what it's like to feel trapped, to feel like you're losing yourself before you've even started your life." Her words hit me like a slap. Trapped? Losing herself? I had sacrificed so much to build our life together. And now she was trying to paint herself as the victim? I shook my head, disgusted. "You don't get to play the victim here, Jessica. You made your choices, and now you're going to live with the consequences." She glared at me, her face red with anger. "What do you want from me, Erin? Do you want me to beg? To grovel? Is that what it'll take to make you feel better?" I stared at her, my anger giving way to a cold, hollow emptiness. "What I want is my life back. But thanks to you, I'll never get that." Her defiance faltered, and for the first time she looked genuinely afraid. "You're serious about the divorce, aren't you?" I nodded. "I've already started looking into it. This marriage is over, Jessica." Her face crumpled, and she sank into the chair, sobbing. But this time I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. She'd destroyed everything we had, and no amount of tears could change that. That night, I packed a bag and left the house. I couldn't stay under the same roof as her anymore. As I drove to a hotel, I felt a strange mix of emotions: grief, anger, and an odd sense of relief. For the first time in years, I wasn't living under the shadow of her lies. But as I settled into the hotel room, another thought crossed my mind. If she'd lied about her bachelorette weekend, what else had she been hiding? I wasn't ready for the answer, but I knew I had to find out. Leaving the house felt like ripping off a bandage. For years, I had thought of it as a sanctuary, a place where Jessica and I had built our life together. Now it felt tainted, like every wall was stained with her lies. At the hotel, I sat on the bed, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted to let it all go, to stop digging and focus on the divorce. But I couldn't. Jessica's actions during the confrontation, the defensiveness, the way she deflected blame, left me with one burning question. What else is there? That question became my obsession. I started by going through our shared accounts, phone bills, emails, social media. Jessica had always been meticulous about covering her tracks, but she wasn't perfect. It didn't take long to find the first crack. On our phone bill, I noticed a number that appeared dozens of times over the past few months. It wasn't saved in her contacts, but the frequency of the messages and calls stood out. I called the number, my heart pounding. "Hello?" A man's voice answered. I froze. "Who is this?" he asked again, sounding confused. I hung up without saying a word. My hands were shaking as I stared at the screen. Who was this guy? Why was Jessica talking to him so often? The next day, I decided to dig deeper. Using a reverse phone lookup tool, I found out the number belonged to a man named Tyler. I didn't recognize the name, but a quick search on social media gave me all the answers I needed. Tyler was a coworker of Jessica's. He worked in the same department, and judging by their tagged photos, they'd been on more than a few work trips together. The photos made me sick. In one, they were sitting next to each other at a conference, laughing. In another, they were at a bar with a group of colleagues, their body language far too familiar for my liking. I scrolled further and found a post from a few months ago, a picture of Jessica and Tyler at a team-building event. The caption read, "The dream team, couldn't ask for a better work wife." Faced with tears of joy, work wife. The term made my blood boil. I thought about confronting Jessica again, but what was the point? She'd just lie or spin the situation to make it seem harmless. Instead, I decided to watch and wait. Over the next few days, I hired a private investigator. Felt extreme, but I needed answers, real answers. I wasn't going to rely on Jessica's version of events anymore. The investigator worked fast. Within a week, he sent me a detailed report, complete with photos and timestamps. Jessica and Tyler weren't just co-workers. They were lovers. The photos showed them meeting at a coffee shop near her office, holding hands as they walked to a car. Another set of photos showed them entering a hotel together. Couldn't believe it. After everything that had already come to light, she was still lying to me, still betraying me. This wasn't just about her bachelorette party anymore. This was a pattern, a lifestyle. That night, I confronted her one last time. I came home to find her sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like nothing was wrong. The sight of her calm, casual demeanor made my anger boil over. "Jessica," I said, throwing the investigator's report onto the coffee table. She looked up, confused at first, but as she flipped through the pages and saw the photos, her expression shifted to one of pure panic. "What is this?" she stammered. "You tell me," I said, my voice cold. "You've been seeing Tyler behind my back, haven't you?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. For once, she didn't have a ready excuse. It's not what it looks like," she finally said, her voice trembling. "Don't," I snapped. "Don't you dare insult my intelligence. I've seen the photos. I've seen the calls and messages. You've been lying to me for months, maybe even years." She tried to reach for my hand, but I pulled away. "Please, Aaron," she begged, tears streaming down her face. It didn't mean anything. He was just someone to talk to. I was lonely. I felt like we were drifting apart. Her excuses sounded like static in my ears. "Lonely?" I repeated, incredulous. "You felt lonely, so you decided to destroy our marriage even more? How does that make any sense?" She crumbled, sobbing into her hands. But this time, her tears didn't soften me. They only made me angrier. You don't get to cry, Jessica. You don't get to play the victim. You've been lying to me for years. First, the stripper. Then Vegas. Now this? How many times do I have to find out about your betrayals before you finally tell me the truth? She looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. I don't know, she whispered. I don't know why I did any of it. I'm so sorry, Aaron. Please, give me another chance. I'll do anything. Her desperation was almost pathetic. But I was done. You had your chances, Jessica. 8 years of chances. And you wasted every single one of them. Her sobs grew louder as I turned and walked out of the room. This time, I wasn't just walking away. I was closing the door on our life together. That night, I finalized my decision. The divorce wasn't just a possibility anymore. It was inevitable. Jessica had shown me exactly who she was, and there was no going back. But as I lay awake in my hotel room, I realized something. Jessica's betrayals had destroyed our marriage, but they'd also given me something I didn't have before: clarity. I didn't just want to leave her. I wanted to rebuild my life. And for the first time in years, I felt ready to start over. The divorce process began immediately after that final confrontation. I contacted the lawyer I had been researching, a no-nonsense professional who assured me that we'd handle this swiftly and without drama, at least on paper. Jessica didn't take the news well. When I handed her the divorce papers, she broke down again, begging me to reconsider. She swore up and down that she loved me, that she'd do anything to prove it. But her words felt empty, like a broken record stuck on the same tired excuse. It's not too late, she pleaded, clutching the papers to her chest. We can fix this, Aaron. We can go back to the way things were. I shook my head. The way things were? Jessica, things were never what I thought they were. You made sure of that. She tried to argue, but I cut her off. I don't want to fight with you. Just sign the papers and let's move on. Her tears turned to anger. You're really going to throw away everything we've built? 8 years, Aaron. Does that mean nothing to you? That question stung, but not in the way she intended. I'm not throwing anything away, Jessica. You already did that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings, splitting assets, and emotional roller coasters. Jessica oscillated between crying and raging. Some days, she'd send me long, emotional texts about how sorry she was and how much she loved me. Other days, she'd lash out, blaming me for the failure of our marriage. You were never there for me, one text read. You cared more about work than you did about me. The audacity of her blame-shifting was infuriating. I had always been there for her, supporting her career, planning for our future, being the steady foundation she claimed to need. But what infuriated me most wasn't her words. It was the way her actions continued to contradict them. One night, I got a call from Kelly, her former maid of honor. I hadn't spoken to Kelly since the videos came to light, but I hadn't forgotten her role in covering up Jessica's behavior. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, Kelly began hesitantly, but I thought you should know something. My stomach tightened. What is it? It's about Jessica. She's been talking to Tyler again. I didn't want to get involved, but I thought you deserved to know. Hearing Tyler's name again was like pouring salt on an open wound. Why are you telling me this now? I asked, my voice laced with suspicion. Kelly hesitated. Because I feel guilty, okay? I knew about what happened in Vegas, and I didn't stop her. I thought it was just a fling, something she'd regret and move on from. But seeing what it's done to you, I can't stay quiet anymore. Her words were like a knife twisting in my gut. You helped her lie to me for years, I said coldly. And now you expect me to believe you suddenly care about what's right? I don't expect anything, she replied. I just thought you should know. I hung up without another word. The next day, I confronted Jessica about what Kelly had said. Are you still talking to Tyler? I asked bluntly. Her eyes darted away, a telltale sign she was lying. No, of course not. Why would I? I pulled out my phone and showed her screenshots of the messages Kelly had forwarded to me. Messages between Jessica and Tyler, sent just days ago. "You've got to be kidding me," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You're still seeing him? After everything?" Jessica's face turned red, but not from shame. From anger. "Why do you even care? We're getting divorced, Aaron. What I do now is none of your business." Her words hit me like a slap. "You're right," I said coldly. "It's not my business anymore. But don't you dare try to rewrite history. You've been lying and cheating for years, Jessica. At least have the decency to own it." She opened her mouth to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. "This is exactly why I'm done with you. You've never taken responsibility for anything in your life. And now, you're finally reaping what you've sown." By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt like I had aged a decade. The process was grueling, emotionally and mentally. But when the papers were signed and the lawyer called to say it was officially over, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. Jessica didn't make things easy, of course. She tried to guilt-trip me into reconsidering until the very end, but I stayed firm. "I hope you're happy," she said bitterly as she handed me the signed papers. "I will be," I replied. That night, for the first time in months, I slept peacefully. The weight of her lies, her manipulations, her betrayals, it was finally off my shoulders. But as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. I realized that Jessica's betrayal wasn't just about the affairs or the lies. It was about trust, respect, and the foundation of a relationship. And she had destroyed all of it. The fallout wasn't easy to navigate, but it taught me one important lesson. You can't build a future with someone who refuses to take accountability for their past.